There's a there's a quote I read like a year and a half ago, and I'm actually trying to flesh it out into a Substack article now, and it's a quote from a lady who wrote a lot of poetry. Her name is Jane Hirschfield, and you'll know why I call her a lady who wrote a lot of poetry and not a poet when you hear the quote. And it was a fascinating thing that she said. I only say I'm a poet when I'm writing a poem. It's not an identity you can rest in. It's an activity that you can enter. So,
Mhm.
like, you're not the thing unless you're actually demonstrating it in the moment. Like once you're done demonstrating it, you can't just say like, "Oh, I'm a poet." Oh, really? What does that mean? That means I wrote an anthology of poems a few years ago. Okay, but like, are you still doing it? Do you do that at all as a hobby? Are you still involved in it, engaged in it, or are you just talking about your past?
Right. No, no, that makes sense. So,
So
so,
I'm
so drunk
fascinated
is
by
the
that
only
quote.
thing I could describe it.
Great.
But no, it is. I do think people get too wrapped up in labels and identity type stuff where they want to
Yes.
label themselves something or
Yep.
something else when who cares?
Like do the work.
Well, so I teased two things to you that I had a rant I was going to go on that I haven't gone on, and a hypothetical.
I
And
haven't gotten the rant yet.
no, no, you have not gotten the rant.
Go for it.
I'll
I'm going to sit back and sip some of this extremely alcoholy stout
I
while you
think
rant.
yeah, I think this relates to the rant or to the topic of because it got me fired up about labels. And I was talking to my mother, another family reference, about the Pope and all this stuff, and she and so many of her friends are borderline obsessive over, who's gonna be the Pope and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't care. I view the Pope almost like not as evil. Don't get me wrong. I'm not comparing them, but almost like I view someone who's in the running for president. Like you've probably had to do some bad shit to get that high up in your organization. And I don't want to I don't know anything bad about this Pope, and I don't want to, frankly, I don't want to know anything. I know he's American. I know he's a White Sox fan. I don't want to know anything else about him because I don't want to disrespect him and I also don't want to worship him. And that got me off on a whole tangent of the problem today is people identify and make religion their political identity becomes their political opinions becomes their identity, and then the thing they worship is that.
Yes.
Um, and anyone who disagrees, it's ridiculous. And I can't wrap my head around how dumb people are. But I think I know a lot of people in libertarian circles, in liberal circles, who basically disavow religion because it doesn't agree with all of their politics. I would argue libertarianism, it's more organized religion that the libertarians attack. But like liberals, they're told they have to be pro-choice. You have to be for abortion. And if the Catholics are going to say abortion's never acceptable, that means they have to choose between their religion or their religion. And I
Yes.
think more people choose their political religion than their religion. And I don't, I've always said this because I've never considered myself religious, and abortion's probably the worst topic for me to talk about. But I've always said this: I don't know how I feel about laws regarding abortion. I think as a human being, it's detestable and never an acceptable thing, personally.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with religion. That has to do with the rights of an individual who's being murdered.
Right.
Um, that's always been my take. And I'm like, this has nothing to do with God. If I didn't believe it, so another thing I've always said is anything someone does only because they think outside of pomp and circumstance and ceremony.
Hmm.
So, celebrating Easter and stuff. That I'm not talking about that. But outside of that, if someone's choices are, should I be nice to this person or mean to this person? Well, God wants me to be nice, so I'll be nice. Should I kill this baby or not kill this baby? Well, God doesn't want me to kill the baby. Anyone who's that ethically weak that they have to use God as a reason to be kind to other human
Hmm.
beings or to not do terrible things to others. I'm like that person is this close to being taken over, and I think part of our society's problem is now they have been taken over. So I think that's a problem, but now it's on the political end. So now it's anyone who disagrees about tariffs, anyone with half a brain, uh, anyone who disagrees about tariffs must be a commie leftist. And no, we support the guy who's calling for tariffs and price controls. He's not a leftist.
No, all
Uh,
right.
I'm like, he if a liberal posted this thing about Walmart, I don't know if you saw what Trump said, where Walmart, they make so much, they cannot be passing the tariffs on to their customers. They can just take less profits. They made billions last year. I'm like, if AOC posted that, we'd all be like, look at this stupid commie bitch.
All right.
Like, you literally could just change the name of the person who posted it.
Yep.
And but that is my point, is that the MAGA people are hoodwinked into worshiping everything that this man does, no matter what it is.
Hmm.
They could, again, if you change the name on the post, and this goes to both ways. I should be clear. I'm not really just trying to attack Trump. He just had the most recent thing as of this recording that deserved to be mocked. But if you just change the name of the person who posted from AOC to Trump or vice versa, you would have people on both sides doing somersaults to defend the viewpoint.
Yep.
And that's where it's like, this has become, there's no doubt in my mind that people worship individuals, be it the Pope, be it the president, be it, a dingbat like AOC. They worship them, I guarantee, at a higher level than they worship Christ, which, again, this is coming from someone who's not, I don't subscribe to any organized religion's viewpoints. I have my own view on God. So this is not coming from someone who's like, you should go to church all the time and do this. If you get something out of church, you should go to church. I get nothing but sore knees and annoyance. So I'm like, I don't believe in a God that wants me to go through a miserable experience to worship him. That seems like a very bad God in my view. I say this too, and sorry, I've got, you probably have like a million things you can touch on from this rant, but I also say I don't believe in hell because the God that I believe in, if he's real, he loves his children. Would you ever send your children to hell? No. No, which is where I've actually started to believe, and I know this doesn't vibe with the Catholic Church. I've started to believe in reincarnation. I feel like Earth is purgatory or hell or whatever you want to label it. It doesn't matter. And you master it down here, your soul ascends to heaven. Otherwise, this is a shirt. This is just a meat suit. My soul is different than my body. My body, I could, why not get another body to try it again? See how it goes. And if I ace this life, I ascend to heaven and I don't need to do it again. Um, anyways, I even veered off topic from my rant to go into I've created my own religion basically, which is like a mixture of Catholicism and Hinduism and
All right. Yes. That was quite a rant. I'm glad I was present for that. It was very good. One of the articles I wrote uh, sometime last year is titled "All Governments Are Religions,"
yes.
because people in the modern West and especially the U.S. get fooled into thinking they're not, because supposedly we have freedom of worship. Hey, they wrote that in the amendment. It's in the Constitution. Da 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 da. Uh, Governments have always been about what people believe and about trying to find other people who share that belief. And by beliefs, I mean things like human purpose, um, human nature. These are all beliefs about that. So when you said you think uh, aborting a baby is a horrible thing to do to the child, but you're not sure how you feel about having laws about it.
Right.
That's the kind of thing that a lot of people never would have distinguished one from the other, because it's been since as far back as we have historical records of civilizations. What you believed has been also things that you wanted imposed society wide.
Right.
You want it to be manifest in your social order somehow. So all governments have been religions. They still are. Like the US government is religious. It always has been. Even if they tell you things like we will not respect an establishment of religion. In a sense, that's like what the old Roman Empire used to do. I mean, you could worship whoever you wanted as long as you worshiped Rome. So people may have heard that say like early Christians were killed by the Romans for being Christian. That's actually not true. The Romans don't care who you worship as long as you worship Rome.
Mm.
You can have whatever else you want as long as you worship Rome. So the Christians were persecuted because they refused to worship Rome. And you say, well, is that really what it is like today? I think so. And the example I used was try being at a ball game and not standing for the national anthem.
Yeah. You'll get some
Try not
shit.
doing the Pledge of Allegiance in school when everybody else is doing it. The U.S. is like that today. Believe whatever you want as long as you worship the U.S. It's the same.
Yeah.
All governments are religions. Now, does that mean that all religions are government? Well, not necessarily, because the way you've expressed it as well is that doesn't necessarily mean that because I believe something, I want it violently imposed on other people. It doesn't mean that I want some sort of hierarchical structure that forces people into it. I have beliefs that can be fine with spontaneous order rather than imposed order. The things I believe about human purpose and about humanity in general and about individuals not only do not require them to be imposed on people, but my beliefs are against them being imposed on people. My beliefs are against these things looking like they're being followed simply because people have been threatened with harm or have actually had harm inflicted on them by some institution that is apparently allowed to do this.
Yeah. The it's I guess maybe that's where I always have I think you've given me a realization that you and I and a very small percentage of people have brains that think that way of and I don't think I've ever actually thought this through of I believe strongly in this. That doesn't mean I demand everyone else feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
Or worse than that, I would prefer everyone feel that way. I don't believe government imposing my belief on other people. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
if I was in charge of the world, I would have the golden rule be the only law. Like just treat other people how you want to be treated, and we'd be fine. Like that's it. That's all.
If I were in
Um,
charge of the world, I wouldn't be.
right, right. There would be no. I would
No top down anything coming from me.
no. I would just be nice to people, and there'd be no rules, but lead by example, which I guess would be the golden rule. But yeah, it's Yeah, I guess it's just that people can't, and not only what you said, governments are religions. I feel like the political parties now are religions also.
Sure, they're
And
factions within the religion.
right, right. And that makes it where, well, you better be cool with cutting off genitalia of teenage kids because otherwise you're a bad person. You're on this
Yep.
side. It's like, why is there no nuance in anyone's brain? Another conversation I had with my sister was I told her she should watch the Stanford Prison Experiment movie that's on Tubi, which you're
Okay.
probably familiar with the Stanford Prison Experiment where they
I
made
keep
some.
getting them confused. Which one is where they
That's the
shock
one where
people or
they
what? Go ahead.
guards and prisoners, not
Okay.
the torture one,
Okay.
where they thought they were killing, or not the electrocution one. That's the one that I always mix up with the Stanford Prison Experiment. But these are Stanford students, and half of them are guards running a prison, and half of them are prisoners. And they had to shut it down, I think, in 5 days because the guards just were beating the shit out of these kids. They were having breakdowns and just all this stuff. And it's like, if someone wants to know what I feel about police, watch that movie. You get given
I
this power that you're above the law.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, it's human nature, I feel like, that you're going to abuse it. And you're going, like, I'm not saying all cops are bad. I'm saying cops existing is bad. I don't. That being said, I always argue with my brother, who's a pure anarchist, about things. Where I'm like, yeah, but if someone kills someone, someone needs to be able to step in and you know put them away or do something to them. So I'm not saying I even have the answers, but my general attitude towards cops, it's like watch that movie because I've read about the experiment before, and I don't know how accurate the movie is, but I'm sure it's not terribly off. Um, but it's like just watch that movie. That's how I feel about cops. You give anyone that badge, that tell them they are the
Mhm.
law. They're not above they are the law.
Yep.
Um, it's going to corrupt with absolute power corrupts absolutely or something. I think I
Hmm.
butchered that saying, but uh, but things like that. And the party that worships the police is the party that says we need to be able to have guns so that we can protect ourselves from the government. And the party that says all cops are bad are the ones that say you don't need guns. That's what the police are for. But they're all
Right.
racist.
Yeah.
It's like it's the simplest. Like there's no nuance in anyone's brain that worships political party. Like it's just. And there's a million examples. The gun one's always the one to me that jumps out the most. Like all cops are racists and they go around killing black people with no reason and they're all bad. We should defund the police. But what happens if someone's threatening you and your family? Well, call the police. They're the only
Mhm.
ones who should have guns. Like
What happens if somebody uses the wrong pronoun? Well, call the police.
right, right. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, in Canada, or in maybe not Canada, in the UK, you can get arrested for using the wrong pronoun. In
I've
Canada,
seen
if
some
a
stories. Yeah.
parent prevents their child from getting gender reassignment surgery or taking puberty blockers, there's a guy who's in jail over not letting his son take puberty blockers,
Hmm.
which is also I found this out, just a side note. Puberty blockers is just a term they made up for what used to be called chemical castration.
Yes.
It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you people?
Yes. Yes. The word you used is correct. It's accurate. Worship. Worship is it's a smushing together of the words worth and ship. It's like friendship, companionship, worthship. So what you worship is the things or the ideas that you hold in such high regard that it they order the rest of your beliefs and you're willing to sacrifice for whatever that is.
Mm.
And that does happen with politics. People get their sense of purpose from politics. They get their sense of humanity from the political parties or from whatever side they're on in government disputes. And it's enough where it starts reordering the rest of their priorities and they're willing to sacrifice for it. So it is completely worship. That's why when someone tells me they're not religious, but then they describe their political behavior and it's fanatically religious.
Yes.
Like it's fanatical worship. It's not even like, oh yes, it's a very robust and well thought out and well reasoned and compassionate belief system. No, it's just fanatical religion.
I just had the thought pop into my head of, and I'm guilty of it from a, depending on where you live, it may or may not make sense, but like, around election season, it's very common to drive through a busy intersection and there's a bunch of people waving signs on the street corner,
Yep.
cars honk, wave, all that stuff. And it's like, I'm like, oh, all these people are idiots, almost no matter who they're supporting, I think they're idiots. Again, I come from a different perspective. Most people either hate them or love them, depending on which candidate.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some people who go on street corners and hold signs about God or try to preach the gospel or whatever on a street
Mm-hmm.
corner. And everyone's like, oh, look at this crazy homeless person. And everyone, like, I'm like, they might be a perfectly rational person trying to, this is the way I'm trying to share Jesus with others. Nobody, even if religious people, will pass by that person and not think, what a kook. But the political people, depending on whether you're on their team or not on their team, you'll think they're either horrible Nazis or they're lovely people doing a great thing for society.
Right.
I've never thought that if you try to preach for God, you're considered a crazy person. If you're outside of a church, not let alone on a street corner.
Sure.
If you're trying to preach for a candidate, people may love you or hate you, but they're never going to think you're crazy.
Oh, it's
And
your civic duty. It's a civic virtue.
golly, I did tell you'll probably be happy to hear. I told
Okay.
Joseph the other day that
Your brother Joseph?
my brother Joseph, another family
Okay.
reference, I told him I'm like I think I'm done voting. He got excited, and I said for national positions.
Okay.
I I'm like I still think again. I'm like I used to call myself a pragmatic libertarian. Now I'm like, can I be called a pragmatic anarchist? Like like I understand there is a system in place, and I would call myself now a collapsitarian, where I want it all to fall and burn. And
Right.
so I give myself that title, but I'm like, I'm also pragmatic, and I do know that who I vote for school board can affect my children in this county. So I
Hmm.
can't, in good conscience, ignore those things. I know, when St. Petersburg City Council swung a certain direction, things got really stupid in a lot of ways. And now that it's swinging back the other way, things are being a little more fiscally responsible. And hey, let's actually fix problems, not worried about renaming a library Barack Obama Library, which
And it may swing stupid in another direction now
it
that it's swung back in a
It,
different way. There's
it certainly could. It certainly could.
there,
But yeah, it was like, hey, every time we get a bad storm, we dump thousands of millions of gallons of sewage into the bay and into the Gulf. Maybe we should fix that instead of worrying about, you know, pronouns and you
ha,
know that kind of stuff. So
there you go.
so that's where I'm like, it does. I can't ignore that yet. I'm probably close to the point where I'll start ignoring that. But I'm like, this time especially, it's like I'm done with any national voting. First of all, it's your vote doesn't matter. Let's obviously, like statistically, your vote means nothing. But also it's like it's all look at the things we still don't have the Epstein list. I know you
No,
see me tweet about it all the
I
time.
have, yes.
That's the one that's like my passion because it's like we're protecting pedophiles. That's
Right.
all we're doing. There's no I don't care what I know I think you commented on the tweet where I said, if our national security depends upon protecting pedophiles, I don't want to be a part of a nation. Like the nation shouldn't exist if it depends
Yeah,
on
right.
protecting pedophiles. So that's like my like let's at least get these fuckers. Like at least do that. I know you're a flat earther economics with your tariffs, but 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 like at least give me the why hasn't he looked into his own assassination attempt? You would think that would interest him. I
Just a
think he
little bit.
know. I to me, I'm like, I think he knows if he does, he'll end up dead for real this time. So he knows just leave it alone, and they'll leave me alone.
But
And probably the same with the Epstein. But that's part of my point is where it's like it's you. They're all the same. They all report to the same master, whoever, whatever entity that is, and
mhm.
it's not the American voters. That much I can promise.
You, in your rant, you also mentioned kind of an ambivalence towards whoever the Pope is. Um,
Hmm.
that's that's kind of commonplace for most of history, though. Um, there's a tendency to think that the way we do things now and the things we have available to us now, they must have always existed. Like, for instance, mass communication. For most of Christian history, unless you were in Rome, because the Pope is the Bishop of Rome, um, like, what were the chances that you would even know who the Pope was? Know what he looked like? Ever heard him speak? It's
Uh,
not going to happen.
yeah, they definitely didn't have cameras rolling looking for smoke. I
No,
mean,
they had no idea. Like you had no idea. Now you can follow the Vatican on Twitter, on X. You can follow you can, you know, subscribe to the Pope's feed and find out what he's thinking, just like you can do with anyone else. But for most of Christian history, if I mean, if in the early church, if you lived in Antioch, you dealt mostly and cared with whoever the clergy were in Antioch, whoever your community was there, not in Rome. If you were in Alexandria, that's who you saw and who you knew about. You didn't. You may have heard eventually, and even through the Middle Ages, you may have heard the Pope's name, but that didn't mean anything to you.
right.
It's like, oh, I know that guy. I've seen him on TV before. I've seen him in the papers. No, you haven't. You,
See,
you have no idea,
I would like the president to be like that. The
right?
like the president, like keeping our current structure. If the president was like, I don't know who's president, who cares? It doesn't affect my life. They're in
Doesn't
Washington. I live
affect
in
my life,
Florida.
right? Yeah. And I wrote another article recently. It was the Wednesday right after Easter Sunday, uh, called "No Idling Zone,"
Mm,
where I started with the Living Color Cult of Personality song. Uh, because I'm not into celebrity culture. I'm just not. And even as a Christian, I'm not into Christian celebrity culture either. I think
yeah.
there's a problem with celebrity culture, and you don't make it better by just having your flavor of celebrity. Like there's something wrong with celebrity culture. There's
Yes.
something wrong with wanting to put people on pedestals and building a belief system out of social stratification. Like there's something wrong with that model, no matter how you fill in those slots along the model. Like the model itself is wrong. If you're
Right.
idolizing the Pope, that's not really Christianity. If you're idolizing your favorite megachurch pastor or your favorite historical figure, that's not really the genuine belief system that you pretend that it is. Like the Pope, great. He's got a job to do. It's a tough job. He's got to be an administrator. He's not only the bishop of a large diocese, but he's the guy that the other bishops look to for guidance. It's a rough job, man. Even if you do it well and there's no scandals and nothing untoward, it is a rough job. For the first almost 300 years of the papacy, it was a death sentence.
Hmm.
If you became Bishop of Rome, you knew you had just signed your own death warrant. There was, and I forget which one it was, but for the first 300 years of Christianity, there was one Bishop of Rome who was not killed by the Roman Empire. One guy.
Wow.
Everybody else was killed. And it became so that you knew it. Imagine taking the job knowing that you're signing your death warrant.
Well, see,
So
that's
it's a
someone whose
rough
character I
job,
wouldn't question.
right? And then there's an inflection point with Emperor Constantine where all of the incentives change and it becomes more difficult to parse. But, even then, with all of that happening, if you're not in Rome, like, it's very difficult for you to even know that's happening. So I think mass communication leads us to believe that, oh, well, this is how the world has always been. You're supposed to care maniacally about what's happening on the other side of the world. Why? Why would you do that? You're supposed to make celebrities out of these people. Why? Why would you do that? I mean, it's a completely one sided relationship as well. You think the
Yeah.
celebrity knows who you are?
No.
You think the celebrity knows anything about your life?
Or give a shit about
You think the celebrity follows you on X? Like, I mean, maybe as a courtesy, the person running their social media account, if you were a busy enough follower on Instagram, maybe they gave you a follow back at some point.
Yeah,
But
it is interesting though. It popped into my head of, and I know my mother and sister, another family reference, listen to some priest who has a podcast,
okay,
and he is a celebrity.
okay.
Like they're like, oh, he was more popular than Rogan last week, and I'm like, oh, if you say so. I don't know. That seems crazy to me. Um, and whether good, so we both have podcasts.
Yes.
If 5 years from now, and hey, I'm doing movies, so I have multiple avenues too. Where 5 years from now, I am a celebrity, and it wouldn't be my choice, right? I mean, like if this podcast just blew up, and all of a sudden I'm getting 50 million people watching every week, listening every week, um, which is more than I'd want, to be clear. Or if Spaghetti Face makes $1 billion, it won't because it's way too raunchy. But 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 you get what I'm saying. We're both in a position where if your book and your podcast explode, if my podcast or movies explode, you could be a overnight celebrity, even if it
Mhm.
takes a decade of work to become an overnight celebrity.
Whenever
Um,
that overnight happens, there it
right.
is.
Well, a good example is like John Hamm, Bryan Cranston, two guys who became overnight celebrities, but
Mhm.
it took them 20 years to be.
Right.
But the what then, like, if if Domenic Scarcella is a celebrity, 5 years from now, because your podcast just explodes, everyone's buying Good Neighbor, Bad Citizen. Maybe you write another book to, whatever the case is. What is your moral, like? I know you don't want to be worshipped, but if
Yeah.
you are worshipped, what is like? It's like the celebrity is almost in a tough spot. Like yes, I wanted money, I wanted to succeed in my industry, but I
Mhm.
don't want people, like stalking me and worshiping me and thinking everything I say is gospel. Um, So I don't really I don't know what the question is. Like, what's the responsibility then? Because I agree with you. I think it's horrible celebrity culture, and you can see it with you know the one who gets the most I think hate and love is Taylor Swift, where
Right.
if you say
Yeah.
something about Taylor Swift and a Taylor Swift fan sees it, they will launch an army at you.
Yeah.
Um, and most men I know despise her because it's like, why are you showing this six when I'm trying to watch a football game? Uh,
Yes. Part of why celebrity culture is a problem is because as the person, the just ordinary person, you're externalizing too much of your enthusiasm. You're externalizing too much of your life. You're outsourcing it to the celebrity. You're like living vicariously through that person. And that's not part of why I would hope that I wouldn't change if I were suddenly more well known, is because my entire message has been not to do that. My entire message has been about not outsourcing, especially your ethics, but
right.
also not outsourcing your critical thinking. Like, reserve that for yourself, that no matter what somebody tells you, you're allowed to examine the logic there and say, that doesn't make sense. So, I'm there's a difference between someone who's well known and someone who's a celebrity. A person who's a celebrity is sort of what you're describing, I think, is that they're treated as this object of fascination, and then all sorts of things become attached to this person. Like, oh, you should follow this celebrity, and did you hear what this celebrity said? Did you hear what that person said? And suddenly it's changing your mind because of the person who said it rather than what was said.
Mm.
Um, when I published my book, there was even a spot on the back of the book jacket, the back cover, where it said, as you're doing the template for the book cover, it says about the author, and here's all that stuff. And some podcasters as well who would interview me, they would ask, about, well, my background and all this stuff, because I didn't do the about the author section on the book. I just put the book blurb, and instead of putting my picture there, I put the little good neighbor, bad citizen icon. For those of you watching on YouTube, it's on my screen background right now. So I just put that there. And it's like, well, and I even told one podcast, I said, well, because I don't matter. Like, if what I wrote is true, it doesn't matter who I am.
Mm.
And if what I wrote is nonsense, then it doesn't matter who I am. Like, truth is a question of what it is, not what's the title of the person who told you.
Very well said.
And so I'm not into celebrity culture at all, because I think it's a crappy way to treat the person you're celebritizing.
Yeah, and it doesn't give them the
It doesn't treat them
grace.
as human anymore,
Right. Humans should be allowed to say something stupid because they don't know what they're talking about, frankly.
or
But
change their
or
minds,
change their mind, yes.
grow, get more information. Say something that's different from what they used to say. Live someplace, do things, try things that they hadn't tried before, without people who wanted to lock them into some caricature now treating them like crap because of it. Like, celebrity culture objectifies the celebrity, but it also self-objectifies the person who worships the celebrity. It's not
Mm.
good for either one of you. It's not a healthy way to be as a person, and it's not a healthy and truly respectful thing to do to the person you're idolizing. Like, you think it's respectful because you're idolizing the person, but that's not really healthy.
Yeah. No, I think that would be the thing that would bother me the most. Would be like
Yeah.
I'm drunk half the time. I don't want people listening to everything I say, thinking that it's right. Like, come on. I,
And
I,
we
I say this all the time on the podcast, and I was on another podcast recently, and I was telling him about writing Spaghetti Face while blackout drunk. He's like, maybe I'll break my sobriety if I ever get writer's block. And I'm like, I wouldn't recommend that. I'm just different. Like, what works for me doesn't work for most people. So
yeah.
don't think that I'm some sort of like, oh, if I just drink 12 hours a day. then I'll be able to write screenplays or I'll be able to live. Like, because most people
Yeah.
would be dead if they
Not
drank.
fall down and pass out constantly.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I've said a million times is I've never had a hangover. Another thing, aside from maybe when I was a newborn or toddler or something, I've never pissed the bed. A lot of people I know are like, I got too just so drunk I pissed the bed. I'm like, what the fuck's wrong with you, man? Don't stop drinking. You get hangovers, you pee. So I'm different. So yeah, if I were a celebrity, I'd be killing people. Not intentionally, but I mean if they're like, well, he does it, so I'm gonna do it, which is a yeah. Ugh, that's a
And that goes back to your very early point in this conversation about just because I like something or I dislike something, that doesn't mean I want a law passed to impose it. You should be able to do things that are successful or even do things that are not successful and tell your story without it being interpreted that, oh, so his life, he wants everybody else to do exactly the same thing.
yeah.
Well, no, like I don't want everybody to be exactly like me because the world would be a worse place because I don't have the full complement of personality traits that make the world a better place. I don't have the full complement of abilities that make the world a better place. I'm not a very visually expressive person. Visual art would be awful if everybody were like me. Be a much more logical world,
Yeah, there'd be pluses and minuses.
but but we'd be missing so much if everybody just had my limitation. There's I think I wrote about it recently as well, talking about there was a either this or it was part of the podcast on the Sunday buffet. There's a gospel passage where Jesus tries to tell his closest friends, the apostles, yes, there was a parable about the blind leading the blind. If a blind person follows another blind person, won't they both stumble along and fall into a pit? And about a student cannot be greater than their master. And it's not sort of a moral condition that he's talking about. He's talking about just a very practical thing where if all you're going to do is learn from this one person, then that person's limits become your limits, in addition to whatever limits you have. If you're going to follow this person, whatever they do, then that person's blind spot becomes your blind spot, in addition to whatever blind spots you have. So outsourcing what you're doing and externalizing things, it's a bad way to be. And the good answer, if somebody wants to put you on that pedestal, is you want to talk popes and bishops of Rome. The first pope, Peter, when he had gotten a little bit of notoriety for what he was doing, and this is recorded in the Bible in the Acts of the Apostles, there is a person who approaches him and kneels down and starts to venerate him. And Peter's response is, "Get up, I am a man like you." Like, that's your response. Don't let someone's response to you or reaction to you either dehumanize them or dehumanize you. And both of those things probably happen at the same time.
Yeah.
Even though it looks like they're adoring you, there's a dehumanization that happens when you idolize a person. Not only to the person doing the idolizing, but to the object of that idolization. That's why I wrote, my title was, and it's a pun, yes, No Idling Zone, spelled IDOL. Like I'm in favor of people becoming known because they actually do good things and can demonstrate it. That's fine. And I believe in trading with people rather than stealing from people or having it be imposed that someone steals it and redistributes it, which is what governments do. So if you do something that a lot of people want to trade for, well, you will become wealthy from that because so many people are going to want to trade with you. That's fine. I don't care if you're wealthy. How you got wealthy, I would care about.
Mm.
What you do in trading back with other people now that you are wealthy, that I care about. But the fact that so many other people wanted to trade with you, That sounds like a really good thing to me. I shouldn't be envious of that, nor should I begrudge you the fact that you did something that a lot of people wanted to trade with you for. So remembering the humanness of people, I think, is important. Another type of slavery culture that we all lived through recently was during. You're on YouTube. I can't say it. It's the thing with the virus that made people sniffle a little bit and maybe
Yeah.
sneeze.
Fauci.
No, that guy.
Yeah.
That guy. Where suddenly you had expert culture. Expert culture is celebrity culture. It's
Yeah.
outsourcing your thinking and even your value system to someone else. It's externalizing things that you're supposed to, as a person who's mature, or if you're younger, maturing, something that you're supposed to be internalizing and learning how to insource. Like insourced ethics, that's what it means to develop your conscience. So when you brought up very early that, if someone's saying, I shouldn't kill someone because God wouldn't like it, well, that's true. And that's a that's a good place to arrive at. But at some point, at least the God of the New Testament, the God of the Bible, wants you to not kill the person because you've internalized in your conscience what a horrible thing that is to do.
Yeah.
Like God shouldn't have to wag his finger at you in
Well,
order to get you to know that. Now, maybe at the beginning you need to be taught,
yes, I was just going to say it's almost like
but you're
the way
supposed
you
to
said it.
develop and mature. You're supposed
Yeah.
to insource that at some point. That's what a virtue is. As soon as you outsource a behavior, it's no longer a virtue. All virtues are insourced morality. All of them. It's in the definition of what it is.
Yeah. No, when you said that, I'm like, it sounds like something a toddler would say.
Right? And so you have
I'm
to
not gonna
teach
do this
kids,
because mommy and daddy will be mad.
right?
Right?
But at some point, you realize why mommy and daddy would be mad. And
Ideally.
then at some point, you can even evaluate, okay, do mommy and daddy have a good reason for being mad at that? Or are mommy and daddy just off their rockers?
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
now
You need
you're
to
really
discern the
evaluating.
advice.
Yes, now you're able to discern advice. You're able to navigate different influences. So, yes, you go through stages of development. If you're still, a 3-year old and acting like you haven't even reached the age of reason yet, as a teenager, as an adult, as a much more well seasoned person, then what has your maturity been like? What has your development been like? What have you done?
Yeah.
I mean, during the Fauci sickness period, what bothered me the most was not that there's this politician who wants to do that, but that there were so many people who immediately outsourced their thinking and their value system to those politicians and those figures on TV and went along with it. Like I'll throw a question out to you. What's worth, a pathological liar or a pathological believer?
Um, a pathological liar.
They're both bad.
They're both bad, but the pathological believer is the one who enables the pathological liar. I feel like. So without the
Yes,
believer, the liar is a nothing burger, right? I mean,
right. And the other thing is that pathological believers can do terrible things even if they're not led by a pathological liar. They could just be led by someone who made a mistake.
oh yeah, good point. Yeah,
So pathological believers are the worst.
yeah,
Pathological believers are the cause of every horrible atrocity in human history. Every single one. Whether or not a pathological liar was involved, pathological believers are the worst. It did not bother me so much that there were pathological liars who showed up on TV and on radio and in print and at press conferences and on social media saying dumb things, even if they weren't lying about it. Maybe they were just incredibly stupid. Like a lot of these politicians who went on TV, I don't know how much of it was lying and how much of it they were
yeah.
just stupid.
Adam Carolla's thing, stupid or liar. It's hard to tell sometimes.
Hard to tell. And why make it a false dichotomy? It could be a little of both.
Yeah. Well,
But the
it is a fascinating thing that I've struggled with podcast sponsors.
Okay.
Would you advert?
Because you're big enough to do that now. I've heard some of that.
Yeah, and I've had some that I accept because whatever, like nothing wrong with it. I've had some that I've declined because they didn't fit, and some of them were like, you're not going to sell. Like ethically, I don't want to take your money because it's not going to work.
There you go.
Um, like I'd rather be honest. Like women buying plus size clothing are not listening to my podcast, and not the. It has nothing to do with them being plus size. It's that that's not that doesn't make sense. I've also had a law firm reach out to me, and I had a real struggle, and I ended up quoting them a ridiculous amount of money and saying, this will be life changing to me, and I felt like a dirty whore, and it ended up I think they heard me badmouth them on a podcast
Oh.
before the sponsorship went through anyways. And I don't think we align. And I'm like, no, we fucking don't. Like, you are evil. You are the problem with this country. And, but that being said, I gave them a ridiculous quote of, to me, I was like, I'll be taking their money and they will not be getting their value. And I'll be putting food on the table for my kids. I'm like, whatever. And I felt like a whore. Never did it. Luckily, because I
Mhm.
still was always like, if they come back and say they're going to do it, am I going to accept? Am I going to sign a
Right.
contract with these evil people?
So you're bluffing them and hoping they don't call. You're like secretly hoping that it was such a high number that they went no.
Well, there was a movie scene once where somebody said, "Would you?" I think it was a movie, but someone's like, "Would you ever have sex with a man?" No. What if they paid you $1 trillion? Okay, sure. All right. So we've established you're a prostitute. We just need to figure out your price.
Just need to figure out the price. Yes. Oh, that's
And
that's an old quote. It's like
yeah, and it's right to an extent. If they all came and said, "Yeah, we'll make you a millionaire. You need to do ads for our law firm," and even though you find us morally reprehensible, I'd be like, "But I would rationalize it as I know what I'm doing is wrong. No one's gonna really know that like,
Mhm.
and I can do good if I get this money in my bank account. I can do better. Like I'm doing bad now, but and I feel like that's again. I'm saying to the right now, if Anthony Fauci came and said, "I'll pay you $1 million to do an ad for the jibby jab," I mean, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. But
No.
if he did, I'd be like, $1 million. I could do so much good that's better than the harm I did. But I don't think I could do it for that. But if it was something, something else that I'm like, I don't. This isn't good. But the good I
Sometimes
can
you're
do,
neutral on it. And the fact that they're willing to trade with you to reach your audience makes you say, sure. Like you don't have a strong opinion one way or the other on what they're selling. Like there are a lot of things that I use very few products. I'm somewhat of a minimalist. But again, that doesn't mean I'm against all the things I don't use.
right,
You
right.
know,
Well,
it,
and
it
I've got a series of smart home, all of the things that are still in the box. But I'm like, hey, yeah, eventually they might come in use, or I could gift them to somebody. It's a fine company. It's not something I use, but
yeah,
the house I live in already had smoke detectors. I'm not replacing them.
sure. So you just because I don't let's see, I don't wear jewelry, but I'm not against other people wearing jewelry.
Right. I'm
You
not
know,
against plus size women clothing. I just
yes,
I just know taking a couple $100, you're not going to sell a couple $100 through my podcast. So,
right. That's you
but
maybe like cueing them into sort of the audience. and say
Yeah,
like,
well, because I feel like that's a reputation thing too. Now, again, if they come with me and said $200,000, I would have said I'll hawk your moo-moos all day, ladies.
sure,
Just, but
because you're not against it. Like your concern was that, are you sure you know my audience?
right,
Because
I've
you're going to get angry at me
that's
if you don't sell anything.
that's where my ethics came in, where it's like ethically, I can't take your money for something that's you're not going to get value for.
Hmm.
Like I mean, there's if the New Orleans Saints came to me and said, "We want you to play quarterback," I'd be like, guys, I love you too much to let you let me play
Right?
quarterback.
I'm
Uh,
too much a fan of your team
yeah. Now,
to
if the
let you
Bucks
put me
came,
in the.
any other franchise came to me, except for the Falcons, I would never put on a Falcons uniform in a million years. But any of the other 30 teams came to me, I'd say, yeah, give me your money. I'll play quarterback. You're not going to like it, though.
Well, what you're saying goes to a very important economic principle that the what's called the Austrian school of economics has harped on forever. It's that all value is subjective, economically
Hmm.
speaking. Um, Not only that, so there's no such thing as objective value economically, but also because all economic value is subjective, in an exchange of products, both sides win. See, a lot of people think about economics as, well, if I'm getting the better deal here, that means the other guy must have gotten the worst deal.
Mm.
Well, if value is objective, then yes, that would have to be the case. But if value is subjective, then no. When I go to the grocery store and I buy bananas for 49 cents a pound, what I'm saying is the bananas are worth more than me than 49 cents a pound. The
Yeah.
grocery store, on the other hand, is saying, we'd rather have your 49 cents than the pound of bananas. So when I buy that product for them for the price they've listed, we agree to the price. We each are better off.
Right.
They'd rather have my money than the bananas. I'd rather have the bananas than the amount of money I hawked over.
Right.
That's subjective value. It's also subjective value because if you go to 5 different grocery stores, you may see 5 different prices for bananas or apples or steak, bacon, whatever. You're going to see different price levels. And some people will pay that price and some people won't. Now, if I walk by the table of apples, like, no, I'm not paying that much for apples. I don't want apples that much. But somebody else walks by and says, yeah, I'll buy the apples. Well, which one of us is right? We're both right.
Yeah.
All economic value is subjective. As long as neither one of us were coerced into it or violently forced to do it, then we're both right. Is the store wrong for selling apples at that price? Not if they find someone who wants to buy it for that price.
A lot of men were violently coerced into buying things because they were married to somebody. That's what popped into my head.
There you go. And if you wound up not being married to that person later, you realize how your subjective value changed.
Boy, my grocery shopping sure did. Uh,
There
Actually, in fairness, my ex-wife did almost all of the grocery shopping because she was one of those coupon addicts. Like
you go.
hilariously, I never had to buy dish detergent, like Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
I had a garage full with shelves of Dawn because she would like stack deals on deals and be like, I got 64 bottles of Dawn for free. And I'm like,
Very
okay.
good.
When she left, I'm like, well, at least I got dish detergent.
There you go. I
Uh,
have 12 jars of peanuts in a cabinet because there was a sale. And
I,
peanuts don't go bad.
yeah, no, I'm a little jealous that I didn't have her work ethic in that regard because it would be it helped me as a single divorced man to have a garage full of like other there was other stuff too like shampoo and I'm like I don't have to buy anything and it didn't cost me money to begin with or like very
Mhm.
little uh, but she knew how to play that game and she put the time in so I'm glad she didn't take it when she left me.
There you
uh
go. Yeah, what we're talking about there, subjective value. That's important. that's also why it's wrong to violently impose things on people because, you know, I shouldn't deny somebody something that, non-violently they like. It doesn't hurt anybody for them to like it. The same way they shouldn't deny me. So neither one of us should be denying the other, and neither one of us should feel like we're denying. There's
It's my thoughts
another,
on prostitution right there.
well, another. We've already determined what kind of lady you are, ma'am. We're now just negotiating on the price.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not
That's
good
the
at
old quote.
by the way, that's I am not good at negotiating.
Right, negotiating is a problem
Oh,
sometimes. I
I'm
feel
great
you
at
on that.
negotiating with lawyers, not with prostitutes. I'll be clear. I'm like, whatever you say. I can't negotiate with you for what.
Negotiating, it's a struggle of mine as well. I'm not saying with prostitutes, but just anywhere else. Like it's tough for me to like come up with a way to bargain with somebody for something. Like
I
I'm much
was,
better when they tell me like what they're offering and I say take it or leave it.
yeah, I am, actually, I kind of got back to this a little bit. Probably shouldn't say this on the podcast, but whatever. By the way, I think I'm going to have to split this episode into two, looking at the clock.
Hey, go for it.
I've never done that before, but I don't know if you've heard. I might be taking a summer vacation, so if I can make one episode into two, that just means one less week of vacation for the podcast.
There you
Um,
go.
so
While
just
you're doing Thanksgiving again, is that what you'll be
Thanksgiving again.
very
Yes.
good. So depending on when people are listening to this, there's either going to be more news about Thanksgiving again or it'll be, hey, stay tuned.
Yeah, yeah. With it's so weird with movies. That's I'm learning because the last ride's not out yet.
Mhm.
The movie I shot in November, which it's perfectly reasonable for a movie not to be ready
Yes.
6 months after it wrapped shooting. Um, but it's like, hi, I need to promote that, but I need to promote this, and experts are saying you need to get Spaghetti Face going before you start filming this. Let other people work for a month while you're filming for the month of June. Get this to them so they can work on whether they want to be a part of it, whether they want to invest, whether they want, So it's
Mm.
like, man, this you have to be working like two projects behind, two projects ahead, and your current project
Mm.
all at one time in order to succeed. So, weird tangent, but
I wonder, that's not a weird tangent because I wonder if you've had this come up in some of the podcast interviews that you've done as a guest. What is it like for you as an indie filmmaker, indie actor, indie producer? Because when big budget films get made that everybody knows about, the Marvel universe, the DC universe, some action flick, whatever, or big time TV shows, people just kind of assume that there are agents involved and famous people can easily get in touch with other famous people and it comes together. Big budget studios, as long as everything's clicking, it comes together. What is that process like for you as an indie, as someone who's working at a smaller scale, and still trying to find, how do you find a producer for your movie? How do you find a director for your movie? How do you find a sound guy for your movie, an editor, a cinematographer?
still
How do
looking
you
for an
do all
editor.
of that as an indie?
I learned the a harsh lesson. I shouldn't say it that way. Um, I'm on my third pint of whiskey. I'll be honest here. It is interesting, by the way. I realized that in hindsight, if I were to ever become like a successful person in show business, this podcast has actually chronicled it the whole way in a weird
Yeah.
way. I started this podcast, and I think a year in is when I got my first acting role in a movie. And
Women want everything?
yes,
Yep.
and I was a lead in that movie.
Yes, I saw that.
Oh, sorry about that. Uh, it was so what I learned was that movie was destroyed by the guy doing audio not knowing what he was doing. The editor was even worse than that. because I've also learned that you can actually fix bad audio in editing nowadays, and it's not that hard.
Hmm.
Um, so he just had no clue what he was doing. The best stuff in that movie was it's a comedy, was the improv. None of that's there. I still to this day, I'm like, I wish, and maybe I'll reach out and even say, hey, Rod, the guy who directed the movie, do you still have all the original footage? Let's get a good editor to edit this. It wouldn't be a great movie because the writing's a little,
Hmm.
whatever. But if a good editor edited it, it would be like one of those culty kind of indie films that some people would enjoy because comedy is so subjective. My dad said he read like 5 pages of Spaghetti Face and he basically told me it was a pile of dog shit. He's like, I'd never watch this movie. I'm like, you read 5 pages? Like, he's like, it was so graphic. And I'm like, there's no nudity or anything. He's like, I don't care about nudity. You use the F word like 17 times. I'm like, so fucking what? So I get that it's comedy subjective and all that. But I learned a lesson from that movie of, the cinematography wasn't great. The audio was horrific. The editing was the worst I've ever seen. And it's like you need to know these people know what they're doing before you do it with them
How
if
do
you
you
want it to
find
be
them?
successful.
How do you find them as an
Well,
indie?
so I did a handful of things, background and otherwise. But my next movie role, I was the second lead in Haunted Happy Hour, which I think you've seen.
Yes.
And their crew, instead of being like a 20-person crew like Women Want Everything, their crew was 2 people and production assistants. But it was 2 people. And everything was faster with 2 people than 20, 25 people. I was like, I'm confused at what I'm seeing here. And that movie is a fine movie. It looks good. It sounds good. Um, I, you know, I I don't. I like people should watch the movie, enjoy the movie. I think its problem came with kind of not picking a genre. Um,
Ah.
I can say when we shot it, it felt more like a romance movie. When
Hmm.
we saw it, it didn't. Um, so it was choices in editing and stuff like that. But that's not my choice to make.
Hmm.
I was just an actor. I was a hired gun. But when I saw it looked good and sounded good, I said I want those 2 guys to work on my movie.
Okay.
So at the premiere for Haunted Happy Hour, at the after party, I'm 47 PBRs in. They sell them for $3 a can at the movie theater. Only beer and wine at the theater. Um, so I'm quite a bit in. I'm like, hey, I just sold my house and I got some money and I want to make a movie because I can't get acting roles. And both of Chris and Rick are the 2 guys, and both of them were a little surprised, and so was Jack, the guy who directed Haunted Happy Hour
Mhm.
and starred in it. Um, they're like, really? Because most people, rightfully so, I think it's fair, are like, oh, you're like Danny McBride, like you know. Chris, he's like, oh, the first time I saw you and you spoke, I said, oh my God, it's Commander Riker. Um,
Hey.
he's like, you're big, tall, you've got a booming voice. He's like, how are you not getting cast in a ton of things? I'm like, I can't get cast. So I'm gonna pay for a movie, so I just cast myself. Um, and I mean, it's still true to this day. The I don't want to be the guy who stacks up. If you look at my IMDb page, I do have a couple of little things I did in there. Like I did a zombie voiceover for a movie,
There you
which was
go.
just fun. And I'm like, oh, I get a voiceover credit. And it was actually me and my son should also be credited because we just made noises and I kind of cut them together and like, just bleh, bleh, things like that, cut it
Excellent.
together, and they used it as the voiceover for the zombie noises. Um, and I did that for free because I'm like, oh, this will be cool. Um, and I have done other things that are like, 50, $100, whatever. But the main thing, as far as the indie thing, is you have to connect with people and then you have to actually see their work. So you've got to know their personality works and their work works.
Mhm.
Um, and luckily, as far as like getting people for Thanksgiving again, we got a really good reputation, Chris, Rick, and I, when we shot The Last Ride. So we had actresses and actors who were submitting, and I talked to some of them on the phone for certain roles before they even auditioned. And they didn't know who I was, but when they heard The Last Ride, they're like, "Oh, you did that movie? My friend
Mhm.
so and so says that was the best set they were ever on. You guys are so much fun and just
Okay.
everything's cool." My sister, when we were filming The Last Ride, we needed to get uh, oddly enough, this was cut from the film,
Mhm.
but we needed to get a customer for a weed shop that we were shooting at. And so I'm like, hey, is anyone free from 9 to noon on Tuesday? I just send a text. And my sister calls me. She's like, hey, I've got something weird. I was at physical therapy today, and my physical therapist was talking about this theater, and I mentioned that I'd gone to your movie premiere there, and he's like, what's his name? Because my sister has a different last name because she was married,
Okay. Mhm.
Jeff Macolino, and he's like, "Oh, that's the guy doing the last ride. I hear so many people talking about it." And it's like, oh well, we've got a good reputation locally, like,
Good.
but I think that's to answer your question. That's how is be good to work with, good to work for. Um, I think keeping a movie set. So after I shot The Last Ride, I said, now I know why Adam Sandler always works with the same people
Hmm.
because uh, it's like a sleepaway camp, sleepaway summer camp. You're trapped with these people for whether it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 2 days. It doesn't matter. You're stuck with these people, and if they're miserable, the whole thing's gonna suck.